That night, I personally baked a German chocolate cake, my husband's favorite. On top of the cake, I carefully piped, "Happy 35th birthday, my beloved husband." Everything was perfect. The Cabernet Sauvignon chilled to just the right temperature, a fragrant ribeye steak still steaming, and on the table, a gift meticulously wrapped. It was the high-end Swiss timepiece that my husband, Kellen, had wanted for so long. To buy it, I'd taken on several rush orders at my textile workshop, pulling 2 all-nighters, but I didn't feel tired. Only a sweet rush of happiness filled my heart. I wanted to give my husband a complete surprise, a perfect birthday dinner. I felt like it was a reward for all the years of struggle we had been through together. I glanced at the clock. It was almost 9 o'clock in the evening. Impatiently, I frowned slightly, picked up my phone and called him. After several rings, he answered. The other end of the line was quite noisy. I could hear something like the loud clang of industrial machinery. "Baby, I hear you." Kellen's voice sounded a little strained. "Are you heading home yet? Everything is ready. We just need you here to blow out the candles." I tried hard to keep my tone light and cheerful. There was a brief silence on the other end, followed by a sigh from my husband. "I think I'm going to be tied up a little longer, sweetie. There's too much inventory down at the old warehouse. My manager wants me to finish the count tonight so it can be shipped out tomorrow. I think I'll be really late. Go ahead and eat. Don't wait up for me." His words were a letdown. The company's old storage facility was at the end of a back alley, only about a 10-minute walk from our house in the Fairburn Heights neighborhood of Atlanta. It was a rundown unit the company was renting temporarily for bulk storage and planning to return soon. But I quickly consoled myself. It's work. What can you do? "Oh, yeah, you must be exhausted. Have you eaten anything?" I asked, my voice laced with concern. "I grabbed a sandwich earlier. Honey, you go to sleep first. I have to hang up and get back to work." He added quickly, "I love you," and hung up. I put the phone down on the counter and looked at the beautiful dinner, which was already cooling. I couldn't hide my disappointment. But then an idea crossed my mind. What if I bring the cake and the gift to him? He'll be pleasantly surprised. I can wish him a happy birthday and help him finish faster. Just imagining the look on his face brought a smile to mine. Without hesitation, I carefully boxed the cake, grabbed the gift, put on a light jacket, and headed out. The alley leading to the warehouse was deserted, barely lit by the dim glow of yellow streetlights. The cold night wind whipped through my hair, making me shiver. As I got closer, a strange feeling washed over me. If they were taking inventory, the warehouse should be brightly lit, and I should hear the sounds of people moving things. But the entire building was eerily silent, with only a faint light spilling out from the crack of a tiny, dusty window. My heart began to pound, and a sense of dread took hold. Did they finish and leave a different way, or did something happen? I crept closer, trying not to make a sound. The instant I peeked through the window crack, I froze. There were no mountains of messy inventory, no people working. Under the weak light of a lantern placed on some boxes was my husband, Kellen, but he wasn't alone. Facing him was Zuriel, the neighbor who had moved into the house at the end of the alley a few months ago. Her back was to me, but I recognized her long, wavy hair and slender figure. They were talking and giggling. My husband's hand, that same hand that had promised me he'd be home for his birthday just a few hours earlier, was now wrapped around Zuriel's waist with an unbearable tenderness. In that moment, I felt my world collapse. The cake box in my hands suddenly felt so heavy I almost dropped it. My ears stopped working. I couldn't hear the rustle of the wind or the chirp of the crickets. The only thing I felt was a sharp, brutal pain originating in my chest. I tried to tell myself I had seen it wrong, that it was just a normal social conversation. But then my husband leaned in and whispered something to Zuriel's ear, and she threw her head back and let out a burst of laughter. That laugh, under the dim light, sounded incredibly shrill and nauseating. And then my husband kissed her, right in front of my eyes, a long, passionate kiss. That was the reason for his delay. The inventory was a blatant lie. He was cheating on me. He was betraying me on his birthday, just a few feet from our home. Rage and pain hit me like a tsunami, threatening to drown me. I wanted to rush in, yell at them, and put them on blast, but strangely, when the pain reached its peak, no tears came. Instead, a terrifying calm took over. My mind was clearer and sharper than ever, crying, making a scene. What would I achieve? Hearing fake excuses and looking like a miserable fool in their eyes? No, I wasn't going to do that. If they thought they could play me for a fool, I would show them what this fool was capable of. I squeezed the gift box hard. The sharp corners dug into my skin, but I didn't feel the pain. I backed away silently, slipping into the darkness where they couldn't see me. My gaze swept over the surroundings of the old warehouse and settled on the large iron padlock hanging on the main door. A crazy but determined thought crossed my mind. I put the cake and the gift down on the ground and crept to the door. My hands didn't tremble at all. I carefully pulled the two heavy iron doors shut, the screech of metal tearing the night silence. Then I grabbed the padlock. A dry clack echoed. The door was sealed. I stepped back, looked at my work, and managed a cold smile, but this wasn't enough. I went to the back of the warehouse where the old breaker box was located. Without hesitation, I slammed the main switch down with all my strength. A small spark flashed, and the entire warehouse plunged into total darkness. I could hear Zuriel's sharp scream and my husband's curse from inside. "What's going on? A blackout! Help!" They were starting to panic. Perfect. I pulled my new smartphone out of my pocket. The screen lit up, reflecting my terrifyingly serene face. I searched my contacts for the name saved as Mateo, the neighbor. He was Zuriel's husband. I gently slid my finger across the screen and firmly pressed the call button. "Hello, Mateo, are you home?" I asked, forcing a voice of panic and concern. "I think there's been a short circuit in the old warehouse breaker box next door. It's completely dark, and my husband went out for a work dinner and hasn't come back yet. I'm so scared. Could you come take a look?" What would Mateo's reaction be when he saw the scene inside the warehouse? How would I continue my performance? On the other end of the line, Mateo's voice sounded sleepy, but still very kind. "Hey, Amani, a short circuit? That's dangerous. Stay right where you are. I'm coming over right now to see what's up. Give me 5 minutes." His voice was sincere and straightforward, unlike my husband's smooth, cunning tone. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt for involving an outsider in this mess, but as soon as I recalled the image of my husband embracing and kissing his wife, that flicker of compassion instantly vanished. He was a victim just like me, and perhaps he also had the right to know the truth. I hid behind a large oak tree across the way. It was dark enough that no one would recognize me, but close enough to watch the entire performance about to unfold. Inside the warehouse, the banging on the door and the shouts didn't stop. "Is anyone out there? Help! Open the door!" My husband's voice was heavy with panic and anger. Zuriel, on the other hand, was only sobbing and weakly calling my husband's name. "Kellen, I'm scared. It's so dark." How pathetic they sounded. I smiled coldly. It was time for the show to begin. Just as he promised, in less than 5 minutes, Mateo's sturdy figure appeared at the end of the alley. As a man who worked in construction, he was tall and powerfully built. He carried a flashlight and a toolbox. He looked genuinely worried. "Amani, where are you? Are you okay?" he shouted. I didn't answer. I just watched in silence. He heard the banging coming from the warehouse and quickly walked towards it. "Who's in there?" he asked, confused. "Mateo, it's me, Kellen. Help me, please. The door got locked from the outside and the power went out. Can you break it open somehow?" My husband's voice sounded desperate, as if he'd clung to a life raft. Mateo seemed surprised he was there, but still didn't suspect a thing. "That's weird. How could it be locked from the outside? Let me see." He shined the flashlight on the padlock. "This is an external padlock. Someone locked you both in on purpose." "That's terrible," my husband cried. "It must be thieves. They locked us in so they could rob the houses next door." "Mateo, break the lock. My wife, Zuriel the neighbor, is here too. She's really scared." He was truly skilled at making up stories, but that clumsy lie only made the situation more dramatic. Hearing his wife was inside, Mateo became even more frantic. He rummaged in his toolbox and pulled out a bolt cutter. The old iron padlock couldn't resist his strength. After a few attempts, with a sharp clank, the padlock broke. The heavy iron door swung open, revealing a space completely shrouded in darkness. Matteo pointed the flashlight beam inside. The light swept the space and stopped. His whole body went rigid like a statue. I knew what he had seen. Under the flashlight beam, the scene inside the warehouse was starkly revealed. His wife, Zuriel, was sitting on the floor, her clothes disheveled, her hair messy, and her eyes streaming with tears. And my husband, Kellen, was standing beside her, his shirt buttons undone and his face completely bewildered. They weren't far apart, a distance far too short to explain that they had been trapped together by chance. The air became thick and sticky. Even the night wind seemed to have stopped. The only sounds were the agitated breathing of the three people caught in the light beam. "Zuriel! Kellen! What are you two doing here?" Matteo's voice trembled, not from the cold, but from the terrible emotion churning in his chest. Surprise, doubt, and a cruel truth that was becoming clearer with every second. Zuriel didn't dare look at her husband. She kept her head down while her shoulders shook. My husband, Kellen, after a moment of confusion, hurriedly regained a false composure. He stepped forward, trying to stand in front of Zuriel, and stammered, "Matteo, don't misunderstand. We were just what?" Matteo roared. His shout echoed throughout the alley. He was no longer that kind, simple man. His eyes were bloodshot. He glared at his wife and then back at my husband. "I'm asking you what you were doing here behind my back." Right then, I decided it was my turn to appear. I stepped out of the darkness. I was still holding the cake box and the birthday gift. I forced an expression of maximum bewilderment and confusion. "Kellen? Matteo? Why all the commotion?" My appearance surprised all three of them, especially my husband. He saw me, he saw the cake box in my hands, and his face went as white as a ghost. "Imani, what are you doing here?" he stuttered, terrified. "I brought you your birthday cake. You told me you had to work here," I said innocently, blinking as if I didn't understand anything that was going on. Then I looked at Zuriel sitting on the floor and feigned concern. "Zuriel, why are you sitting there? Did something happen?" My acting brought the situation to the peak of irony. Matteo looked at me. Then he looked back at his wife and my husband. The pieces of the puzzle seemed to click in his head. The bitter truth was revealed with crystal clarity. He didn't say anything. He just walked silently towards his wife. Zuriel backed away in fear. "Honey, let me explain." Smack! A slap that seemed to shake the sky left a mark on Zuriel's cheek, sending her sprawling to the ground. In the whole alley, only the echo of that slap and Zuriel's sharp cry remained. Seeing this, Kellen instinctively tried to stop him, but Matteo had already turned and grabbed him by the collar of his shirt. His eyes were blazing. "And you, my good friend, you dare to mess with my wife?" And I, to complete my role, performed my final act. I let out a sharp cry, rolled my eyes, and collapsed onto the ground, unconscious. The cake box flew out of my hands. The German chocolate cake was smashed, and the phrase, "Happy birthday, my beloved husband," was smeared into a mess of frosting. Everything plunged into chaos. Would my feigned faint be enough to deceive everyone and lead the two traitors down a dead end? The chaos in the small alley seemed to enter a new phase after my faint. I lay on the cold ground with my eyes closed, but my ears clearly registered every sound around me. I could hear Matteo's roar mixed with my husband's weak pleas. "Matteo, calm down. Let's talk this through." Then there was a thud. My husband had probably taken a punch. I also heard Zuriel's miserable crying. "Honey, stop hitting him, please." My performance was a resounding success. I had transformed myself from the possible instigator who locked the door and cut the power into a poor victim, a pathetic wife who had collapsed from shock after witnessing her husband's infidelity. Now, all the attention and suspicion were focused on those two traitors. After a while, I felt someone roughly shaking my shoulder. Imani, wake up!" It was Matteo's voice. He must have only remembered me after venting his anger on the other two. I slowly opened my eyes, feigning weakness, and brought a hand to my head. "Where am I?" I moaned. My head hurt so much. I looked around, pretending to be utterly confused. "And Kellen and Zuriel? Earlier I saw—" I trailed off, beginning to sob. My performance seemed to completely convince Matteo. The anger on his face dissipated, replaced by a mix of apology and compassion. He quickly helped me up. "I'm sorry, Imani. I got too upset. Don't worry, nothing happened. I'll walk you home." He helped me to my feet. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my husband sitting on the ground with a swollen cheek and a streak of blood at the corner of his lips. Zuriel was still kneeling beside him, crying, not daring to lift her head. Without even looking at them, I leaned on Matteo, trembling. I want to go home." Of course, let's go home," Matteo said, helping me walk. He didn't say another word to his wife, leaving the two sinners in the dark alley, consumed by shame and humiliation. During the short walk home, I kept up the act. I remained silent, sobbing occasionally, my shoulders shaking. Matteo, walking beside me, kept apologizing, blaming himself for losing control. Only when we reached the door did I whisper, "Matteo, could you not tell anyone about tonight? I'm so embarrassed." He sighed and nodded. "Okay, get some rest. I'll handle everything." Saying this, he turned around. His broad back seemed to bear the weight of anger and pain. I went inside and locked the door. As soon as the door closed, all expression of weakness and pain vanished from my face. I went straight to the kitchen and chugged a glass of cold water. I felt strangely calm. The first act of my play had concluded successfully. Now it was time to wait and see what the main characters would do. Half an hour later, I heard the sound of a key in the lock. It was my husband. He crept into the house like a thief. The swelling on his cheek had turned a deep red, giving him a pretty miserable appearance. Seeing me sitting on the sofa, he flinched. You woke up. How are you feeling?" he asked cautiously. I didn't answer. I just looked at him with a coldness and distance he wasn't familiar with. Disconcerted, he went to the kitchen for a glass of water, then came back out to sit on a chair opposite me, far away. "Imani, about tonight," he began hesitantly. "There's nothing going on between that woman and me. It's just a misunderstanding." His nerve almost made me laugh. Even in this situation, he was still capable of lying. "A misunderstanding?" I finally said, my voice dry. "Then explain it to me. A married man and a married woman, late at night in a dark warehouse, hugging and passionately kissing. What kind of misunderstanding is that?" He was speechless, his face red as a beet. "We were just talking about business. She asked me for advice on a project. It was very dark. She tripped, and I just caught her. Matteo just happened to show up right then, that's all." He invented an absurd story. He must have taken me for a 3-year-old to believe that explanation. I didn't feel it was worth arguing. I stood up silently. "I'm tired. I want to rest." Saying this, I walked straight to the bedroom. I slammed the door shut and bolted it. I didn't want to see his hypocritical face for another second. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. He didn't come into the room either. I guess he slept in the living room. I heard his footsteps, his sighs, the clinking of a glass. He wasn't calm either, but I knew his anxiety wasn't about remorse. It was about fear. Fear that I would make a scene. Fear that Matteo wouldn't stand idly by. The next morning, when I woke up, my husband was gone. He must have left for work early to avoid me. On the dining table was a note. "I bought breakfast and left it in the kitchen. Warm it up and eat. I'll be back early tonight. We need to talk." I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash. I didn't need any more of his hypocritical words. As I was getting ready to take my son to school, my mother-in-law arrived. She walked right in without knocking. My husband must have given her a key. As soon as she saw me, she put on a serious face. "Imani, come here and sit down. I need to talk to you," she said in an authoritarian tone. I knew another storm was brewing. I sat down silently in a chair and waited. Where were you last night? Kellen told me you came back very late. Is that true? She asked inquisitively. Before I could answer, she continued. Look at you, a married woman roaming around at night. What do you think this house is? Do you consider Kellen your husband? I was stunned. Not only had my husband not told the truth, but he had invented a story where all the blame fell on me. He had told his mother that I was the one who had been out late partying, that I was to blame. I looked at the woman in front of me, whom I had always respected and called Mama. A feeling of bitterness took hold of me. Mama, didn't you ask Kellen what he did last night? I asked, my voice trembling. What was he going to do? Come home tired from work and wait for his wife at home? But you? Where were you? Were you out there clubbing with some guy, and now you come back to pick a fight with your husband? Her words were like knives stabbing my heart. Not only did she believe him, but she was also gravely insulting me. In her eyes, I would always be a low-class daughter-in-law. All the fault was mine, and her precious son was always right. My patience had reached its limit. If she wanted drama, she shouldn't complain if I became ruthless. Faced with my mother-in-law's brazen false accusations and her blind favoritism for her son, I realized that any explanation at that moment was useless. She had already sentenced me as guilty, and nothing could change her mind. Instead of yelling and arguing, I chose a different strategy. I took a deep breath to suppress the fury boiling in my chest. I looked her straight in the eye, and with a strangely calm voice said, Yes, Mama, I made a mistake last night. I stayed out a little too late having coffee with a friend, and I worried you and Kellen. I'm sorry. My 180-degree change in attitude left my mother-in-law bewildered. She had come prepared for a long sermon of reproach and reprimands, but my sudden apology caught her off guard. If you admit your mistake, that's fine, she stammered, unsure how to continue. But don't worry, I interrupted her before she could start her usual retail. I've thought a lot about it. Lately, I've been too focused on the workshop and neglected my family. It's my fault. I'll try to change starting now. I'll dedicate more time to Kellen and the family. I spoke with a sincere voice and tears in my eyes. My performance seemed to have an effect. My mother-in-law's hostile expression softened a little. She cleared her throat and said with an arrogant air, That's what I like to hear. A woman, no matter how capable, should always prioritize her home. How much money do you even make at that little shop of yours? It barely covers your cosmetics. This family's economy still depends on Kellen. I nodded. Yes, you're right, Mama. I understand completely. I stood up, went to the kitchen, and prepared her a warm cup of herbal tea. Mama, warm up. Did you catch a chill coming so early? I placed the cup in front of her, showing a filial and submissive attitude. My docile behavior completely disarmed her. She took a sip of the tea and began to lecture. See, if you're this obedient, there's peace in the house. I'll let last night slide. Be good to Kellen. Don't walk around with a frown and an attitude all the time. Men get tired working outside. And if they come home to a wife with a face like a funeral, it's only natural for them to get fed up. It's natural for them to look elsewhere. She was defending her son and, at the same time, giving me a warning. I only responded in a low voice, Yes, yes. But inside, I was laughing. Keep up your act. We'll see how long your and your son's show lasts. After a long time of lecturing me, my mother-in-law left, feeling very smug. She probably thought she had the situation completely under control and had extinguished the small flame of rebellion trying to sprout in me. She had no idea it was the calm before the storm. As soon as my mother-in-law left, I immediately put my plan into action. I knew that words weren't enough. I needed proof, irrefutable evidence that would expose my husband and that neighbor, but I wouldn't do it alone. When Kellen came home that night, he seemed mentally prepared for an argument, but contrary to his expectations, I greeted him with a smile and a hearty dinner. You're here. Wash your hands and come eat. I prepared your favorite dishes today. My attitude bewildered him. He looked at me suspiciously and sat down at the table in silence. During dinner, I didn't mention the night before at all. I only served him food and asked about his work, as if nothing had happened. My calmness seemed to confuse him and make him nervous. When I finished washing the dishes, he started talking hesitantly. "Imani, did my mother come over this morning?" "Yes, she did," I replied, without stopping my scrubbing. "Did my mother say anything to you?" "She just gave me some advice. I think she's right. I was wrong. I shouldn't have come back so late." He seemed to let out a sigh of relief. "Well, I'm glad you understand, honey. Let's drop it." I turned around, looked him in the eyes, and managed a sad smile. "I know I was wrong. I won't put you in a tough spot anymore. I'll act like I didn't see anything from yesterday. Let's go back to being happy like before, okay?" My words, along with my resigned and pitiful look, completely brought down Kellen's defenses. He walked over and hugged me from behind. "Thank you, sweetie. I knew you were the most understanding. I promise it won't happen again," he whispered in my ear. I allowed myself to be hugged. Inside, I only felt contempt. What is a traitor's promise worth? But I needed that trust. I needed him to let his guard down. From that day on, I became a model wife. I woke up earlier to prepare elaborate breakfasts. In the afternoons, no matter how busy I was at the workshop, I came home early to make dinner and wait for my husband. I stopped nagging him, stopped asking where he was or what he was doing. I gave him absolute freedom, and Kellen, just as I expected, quickly fell into the sweet trap I had set for him. He thought I had genuinely forgotten everything, that I had decided to live accepting his deception. He began to let his guard down. The clandestine calls became more frequent, and the sudden extra hours did too. He had no idea that all his movements were under my surveillance. I secretly installed a small GPS tracker on his scooter. Also, under the pretense that his new phone had broken down and needed repair, I gave him an old phone of mine where I had installed call and message tracking software. He gladly accepted it without suspecting a thing, and the evidence I needed began to pour in, one after another. The routes of his travel on the days he claimed to have extra hours didn't lead to the office, but to motels or budget hotels on the outskirts of Atlanta. The mushy messages with Zuriel, the passionate date plans, everything was recorded. He even had the audacity to use the family credit card I had given him to buy gifts for his lover and pay the hotel bills. The more proof I gathered, the colder my heart grew. I no longer felt pain, only the determination to see this through to the end. But I knew this evidence wasn't enough for him to pay a high price. I needed an ally, someone who had the same enemy as me. And that person was Mateo. Would Mateo agree to collaborate with me? And how ruthless would my next plan be? After almost a week of gathering evidence, I had a detailed file on my husband Kellen's and Zuriel's adulterous relationship. Dates, meeting locations, mushy messages, and even the hotel bills paid with my credit card. Everything was so obvious that I thought acting alone wouldn't be as effective. I needed someone who could attack from both sides, someone hurt like me and thirsty for justice. That person was Mateo. The problem was how to approach him. Since the night we caught them at the warehouse, I hadn't seen him again. I figured he must also be steeped in pain and confusion. A man as simple and honest as him, facing the betrayal of the wife he adored, had to be devastated. I couldn't just show up out of the blue. It would raise suspicion. I needed a reasonable and plausible excuse. And the opportunity arose one weekend afternoon. I found out from a neighbor that Mateo was renovating an old house at the end of the block. I decided to fake a casual encounter. I put on a simple business suit and light makeup to appear tired and haggard. I drove to that street, parked far away, and walked closer. Just as I had been informed, Mateo was there. He was drenched in sweat, mixing cement with zeal. He looked much thinner and haggard. His several-day-old beard gave him an even more dejected appearance. He was working alone, without any helpers, probably trying to drown his sorrows in hard physical labor. I took a deep breath, mustered my courage, and approached. "Mateo?" I called out softly. He turned around, startled. Seeing me, a hint of shame and evasion crossed his eyes. Imani?" He hurriedly wiped the sweat from his forehead. "What are you doing here?" "I had some business nearby. I said hesitantly. "I saw you as I was passing by and wanted to say hello. How have you been lately?" My question seemed to hit a nerve. He lowered his head in silence and continued mixing cement with the trowel. "So," he muttered. "Thanks for asking." The atmosphere became awkward. I knew I wasn't getting anywhere this way. I decided to get straight to the point. "Matteo, I know this might not be the right time to talk about this, but I think we need to discuss what happened the other night." As I brought up the topic again, Matteo's hands stopped. He looked at me with a complex expression, a mixture of rage and pain. "What more is there to talk about? Everything was clear." "Yes, it was clear," I said firmly. "But we can't just let them get away with it. They betrayed us. They trampled on our feelings and our trust. Are you going to stand idly by?" He looked at me, and a spark of anger lit up in his eyes. "And if I don't stand idly by, what can I do? Beat them up? I already did that. So what? She's still my wife, the mother of my son. I can't abandon her." "Whether you abandon her or not is your decision," I said. "But at the very least, we should make them pay for what they've done. We need to let them know that you can't make mistakes and carry on as if nothing happened." He fell silent, as if weighing my words. I knew I was on the right track. He was a proud man. His wife's betrayal had not only caused him pain, but also humiliation. What do you want me to do?" he finally asked in a hoarse voice. I knew he had taken the bait. I looked around to make sure no one was there. "It's not comfortable to talk here. Tomorrow at 3 p.m., let's meet at the Lakeview Cafe. I have something to show you. After you see it, you'll know what to do." Saying this, I turned around without waiting for his response. I had planted the seed of curiosity and a faint hope for justice in his mind. I was sure he would come. This encounter turned a fellow sufferer into a potential ally. I would no longer fight alone. Two betrayed people together would unleash a storm. The next day, in the afternoon, I arrived 10 minutes before the agreed time. I chose a table in a quiet corner, discreet, but from where I could easily observe. I had prepared my tablet with all the evidence I had gathered. At 3 o'clock sharp, Matteo arrived. He had shaved and was wearing a clean shirt, which made him look tidier, but his sunken eyes and tired expression couldn't be hidden. He sat down opposite me and waited in silence. Without preamble, I placed the tablet on the table and turned the screen toward him. "Look at this," I said. On the screen was an Excel file with a detailed record of my husband's routes over the last week, extracted from the GPS tracker. Red dots densely marked the places he had visited: Motel X, Hotel I, Motel Z on the outskirts of Atlanta. They all coincided with the days he claimed to have work trips or stayed late. Next to it were mushy messages between my husband and Zuriel. "I missed you so much. See you at the usual spot tonight, honey. That witch of a wife of mine gave me grief again today. So gross. I'm only happy when I'm with you. I sent you some money. Did you get it?" The more Matteo read, the more his face darkened. His hands clenched into fists, his knuckles white. He scrolled to see the screenshots of the expensive clothing and cosmetics my husband had bought his wife with my credit card and the hotel charges. His chest heaved, his breathing quickened. I could feel the rage boiling inside him. "Those scumbags, they're absolute scumbags," he said through gritted teeth. "So that bastard was supporting my wife with your money, and my wife was cheating on me with your husband's money. That's not all," I said, opening another file. It was a voice recording file. It was the call my husband made to Zuriel right after leaving our house after being caught at the warehouse. I had activated the automatic call recording function on that old phone. In the recording, my husband's voice was filled with irritation. "I'm so mad. My wife suddenly showed up and messed up the whole plan." Zuriel's voice was smooth. "Don't be mad, honey. How about we meet tomorrow night? I miss you so much. I'll tell my husband I have an alumni dinner." "Okay, fine. Next time we have to be more careful. By the way, what happened with the land investment project I told you about? Did you mention it to your husband?" "Yeah, I told him, but the old guy is still thinking about it, saying he needs to think it over. What does a simple guy like him know about investments? You decide. I'll find a way to get the money out of him." When the recording ended, Matteo sat motionless, his face paper white. Not only had he been cheated on, but his wife was also on the verge of defrauding him. A man's pride had been mercilessly trampled. They were trying to swindle my money?" he stammered in disbelief. "Yes," I replied coldly. "My husband plans to invest our joint marriage savings into that land and is encouraging your wife to get your money out of you so they can invest together." I paused and delivered the final blow. "And you know what? From what I've been able to find out, that land is going to be rezoned as a non-developable green zone. Buying it is like throwing money down the drain. My husband probably doesn't even know. He's just a pawn in a bigger game. But Zuriel, she knows. She and the real estate agent who sold them the land are cousins." The last revelation was like a hammer blow to Matteo's head. His wife had not only been unfaithful, but was also trying to swindle his money and, in connivance with her lover, set a trap to ruin both him and my husband. Everything was so evident. This was no longer a momentary mistake. It was a planned conspiracy that was extremely cruel and dirty. Matteo rested his head on the table and his shoulders shook. I didn't know if he was crying or repressing a fury about to explode. After a long while, he lifted his head, his eyes bloodshot. What do I do now?" he asked helplessly. I looked him straight in the eyes and said firmly, "Do what a wounded man must do. Get justice for yourself." Our alliance was officially sealed over pain and a burning desire for revenge. Would our first plan succeed? And would it lead the two traitors into a situation where they couldn't laugh or cry? After sealing our alliance, Matteo and I had a long conversation to draw up a detailed action plan. Our goal was not merely to expose their relationship, but to make them pay a high emotional, moral, and, above all, financial price. Our first trap was aimed directly at the land investment scheme that Kellen and Zuriel were plotting. I knew that for my husband, this was an opportunity to prove his worth, to escape the situation of being financially dependent on his wife's garment workshop. He had always felt inferior living off my earnings, and this land was the gamble upon which he had placed all his hopes. For Zuriel, it was an opportunity to get money out of two men. We decided not to stop them. On the contrary, we were going to help them speed up the process so they would fall into the trap as quickly as possible. I returned home and continued my role as the good, naive wife. That night, during dinner, I deliberately brought up the topic. "Honey, how's work going lately? Any news?" Kellen, who was busy eating, looked up cautiously at my question. "As usual, nothing special." "I heard that the real estate market is booming again," I commented casually. "A friend of mine bought a piece of land on the outskirts of Atlanta, and in a few months, it doubled in value. It's too bad I don't understand land. Otherwise, I would have tried it." My words seemed to strike a chord with Kellen. His eyes lit up, but he still feigned modesty. "That depends on the timing and the location. You need foresight." "You're right," I nodded. "I wish I knew as much as you. Oh, by the way, we already have a good amount in our joint savings account, don't we? Almost $80,000 USD. Leaving it in the bank doesn't earn much interest either. If you find a good investment opportunity, don't hesitate. I completely trust your ability." I threw the most tempting bait at him. Not only did I suggest investing, but I also ceded total control of our joint savings to him. This directly tapped into his pride and his desire to prove his worth. Joy was reflected in Kellen's face, but he still pretended to hesitate. "I'll look into it. Money is no joke. You have to be cautious." He had no idea that every one of his words and actions was within my calculations. He was walking step by step into the trap I had set for him. For his part, Matteo also began to play his role. He stopped treating Zuriel coldly and getting angry. On the contrary, he became strangely affectionate and attentive. He offered to do household chores, take their son to school, and even bought her a small bracelet. His change in attitude surprised and greatly pleased Zuriel. She thought her husband had calmed down and decided to forgive everything. She had no idea that behind that kindness was a coldly calculated plan. One night, while the couple was watching television, Mateo cautiously brought up the subject. Zuriel, I'm sorry. I've been too hard on you lately. You must have your own stresses. From now on, I'll try to understand you more and share more with you. Zuriel was very touched to hear those words. She snuggled up in her husband's lap. I knew you were the one who loved me the most. Believing the time was right, Mateo got to the point. The other day, you told me you wanted to invest in some land, right? I've thought about it and it seems reasonable. Leaving money idle also makes it lose value. Look into it carefully. If it seems good to you, let's do it together. Mateo's words were a shock to Zuriel. She couldn't hide the joy on her face. Really? I knew you'd support me. Imani's neighbor's husband, Kellen, told me about a really good opportunity. They say the profit is guaranteed. Sure, I trust you, Mateo said. We have a savings account with $40,000. I'll close it tomorrow and give you the money. You decide. It was as if he was entrusting his entire fortune to his wife. He had made his bold move. $40,000 was all their savings, the fruit of years of hard work. He was willing to sacrifice it to teach his unfaithful wife a very expensive lesson. With the green light from both sides, Kellen and Zuriel, like tigers with wings, accelerated the procedures without any suspicion. Kellen withdrew $60,000 from our joint account. He lied to me, saying it was a business project with a close friend and that it was completely safe. I just smiled, nodded, and wished him success. Zuriel also received the $40,000 from her husband. She told Mateo it was a unique opportunity and that in a few months their family's life would change. They would buy a better house and a new car. Mateo just smiled and encouraged his wife. On the day of the contract signing for the land purchase, in a coffee shop downtown, Kellen and Zuriel were beaming, their faces full of joy. They didn't know that in a car parked not far away, Mateo and I were silently observing everything. With a telephoto lens camera, we photographed the moment they signed the contract together, the moment they cheerfully shook hands with the intermediary, who was Zuriel's cousin, the moment they looked at each other with eyes full of conspiracy and hope. Those photos would become the irrefutable proof of their conniving fraud. The trap had closed, and the prey was completely caught in the net. A total of $100,000 USD, money earned with the sweat of my brow and Mateo's, was transferred to the swindler's account. But we didn't care. We knew that money would soon return, accompanied by the downfall of those who had caused us so much pain. Now, all that was left was to wait for the day when the secret of the zoning plan was revealed. What would the reaction of the two traders be when they discovered they had lost everything? And could the financial collapse break their illicit relationship? After closing the land deal, Kellen and Zuriel lived days of euphoria, dreaming of a prosperous future. My husband became strangely cheerful. He whistled around the house and sometimes bought flowers to put in a vase. He thought he would soon become a successful investor and prove his worth as a man. He didn't know that his laughter would only make his subsequent fall more miserable. Zuriel also didn't hide her air of smugness. According to Mateo, she started looking at luxury homes and imported car models online. She was already planning her upscale life, a life built on deceit and betrayal. She kept pressuring Kellen to divorce me as soon as possible. Mateo, transformed into an unexpected spy, cleverly installed recording software on Zuriel's phone, and what we heard exceeded our expectations. Kellen, when the heck are you going to leave that old wife of yours? Zuriel's voice on the recording was smooth, but also impatient. I can't wait any longer. How long are my son and I going to have to live like this, hiding? Just wait a little longer. My husband's voice sounded hesitant. If I divorce now, she'll ask for half the assets. Her garment workshop is booming. We have to wait. Once we sell the land and have our own money, we'll see. How long am I supposed to wait? Zuriel exploded. You know what? My husband has been acting really weird lately. He's suddenly abnormally nice to me. I'm dying of anxiety. What if he suspects something? You're so distrustful. What's that simple guy going to see? He probably just feels guilty about something and wants to make it up to you, Kellen reassured her. Don't worry. I already have a plan to get more money out of her. I'll tell her we need to invest more, that I want to open a boutique clothing store. She adores her son, so she won't be able to say no. By then, all the money and assets will be ours." Their conversation revealed everything. There were no more sweet words of love, only calculation and exploitation. They saw us, their legitimate spouses, as cash machines, as obstacles that needed to be eliminated. Every word they spoke was irrefutable proof of their guilt. Matteo, sitting next to me and listening to the recording again, had no expression on his face. The pain had probably reached such an extreme that it had turned into cold hatred. He just clenched his fists and said softly, "Let them dream. Meanwhile, I won't sit idly by either." I knew it wasn't enough to wait for the information about the zoning plan to become public. I needed to create an impact, an event that would bring everything to a climax. I contacted an old friend who worked in the city planning department in Atlanta. After catching up, I got the information I needed. The detailed map of the area would be made public on the City Hall bulletin board next Monday morning. This information was still secret. Only industry professionals knew about it. I decided to accidentally leak this information to one person, a person I was sure wouldn't be able to keep a secret due to her loquaciousness. My mother-in-law. I knew she loved to boast and blindly believed in her son's talent. If she found out that her son was about to make a fortune, she would surely proclaim it from the rooftops. The plan was executed perfectly. On Saturday night, my husband and I went to my in-laws' house for dinner, as usual. During dinner, I pretended to receive a call from my friend at City Hall. I went out to the patio to talk, intentionally speaking loud enough for my mother-in-law to hear. "Hello, Carmen. How are things? What did you say? That the zoning plan for that area is going to be made public soon? Seriously? Monday morning? Wow, that's big news. Okay, thank you so much. I'll tell my husband tonight. We also bought a small piece of land over there." I acted completely naturally. I hung up and walked back inside with a joyful expression. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw that my mother-in-law, although pretending to watch TV, had her ears perked up and her eyes sparkling. I knew she had heard everything. I walked over to my husband and whispered, loud enough for my mother-in-law to hear, "Honey, good news. The value of our land is going to multiply by 10. My friend just told me that on Monday morning, they're announcing that the area is going to be converted into a new ecological city." Kellen, hearing this, was shocked, and then couldn't hide his joy. He turned to his mother and boasted, "Mama, see? What talent your son has. I told you, this is the opportunity of a lifetime." My mother-in-law also smiled. Her eyes narrowed, not sparing any praise for her son's intelligence and vision. She couldn't hide her air of smugness and strutted around the house. "I knew it! My son is never wrong. Let's see if your wife dares to belittle you now." Just as I expected, by the next morning, the rumor had spread throughout my mother-in-law's neighborhood. She went from house to house boasting that her son was about to become a real estate mogul and would earn millions. She described a splendid future where they would move to a new house, buy imported cars, and travel abroad. She also hinted that her son would soon leave his old wife, who couldn't have more children, for a younger and prettier one. The bait was set, and the effect was greater than I had expected. Not only the neighbors, but also my father-in-law's relatives found out. They started calling to congratulate, some to ask for loans, others to ask for jobs. Kellen became an important person overnight, a successful man admired by the whole family. He was intoxicated by those false compliments. Even more convinced of his gamble, Zuriel was no exception. When she heard the news, she was even more firm in her decision. She pressured Kellen even more to divorce and tried to get money out of Matteo. Everything was going according to the script. The balloon had been inflated to the maximum, and now all it needed was a small needle to pop it. Monday, the day of reckoning, was approaching. How would the cruel truth of the non-developable green zone cause the dreamers to plummet? And would I achieve my final goal? On Monday morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I felt a little nervous. Today was the day the secret would be revealed. I didn't go directly to the workshop. Instead, I drove past City Hall, near where the land in question was located. From a distance, I saw a crowd gathered in front of the bulletin board. Among them, I recognized some familiar faces, my mother-in-law's neighbors. They were pointing and whispering. I knew the bomb had exploded. I didn't stop. I drove past silently. I didn't need to witness it. I could imagine their expressions right now. The transformation from hope to disappointment and then to anger. I drove to a familiar coffee shop, ordered a calming chamomile tea, and waited. I was sure that in a few minutes my phone would start ringing, and as expected, in less than half an hour, I received a call from an unknown number. I knew it was my mother-in-law. Since I had blocked her number a long time ago, she must have borrowed someone else's phone. I answered calmly, "Amani, you tricked me. You tricked our whole family." On the other end of the line, my mother-in-law's voice was no longer proud and smug. It was a frantic cry mixed with despair. I held the phone away from my ear a little and replied calmly, "Mama, I don't know what you're talking about. How did I trick you? Are you still playing dumb? That land, that zoning plan, it's all non-developable green space. You knew, didn't you? You deliberately tricked my son into buying it, didn't you?" she screamed. "Oh, really?" I feigned surprise. "I only heard what my friend told me. I don't know anything about land. I already told Kellen I didn't know much. He made all the decisions after doing his research. Why are you blaming me?" My words were innocent but evaded all responsibility. She couldn't argue back. You! She was so angry she couldn't speak. She just gasped. "You snake! You made my son lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. You know it!" "Really, Mama? He lost that much?" I continued acting. "Wow, I didn't know it would end up like that." "Mama, Kellen, calm down. Money can be earned back. The important thing is that the family stays together." My words, "the family," sounded like a profound mockery. My mother-in-law couldn't take it anymore. She cursed me and hung up. I put the phone down and took a sip of tea. The first act unfolded as I expected. Now it was time to wait for the reaction of the two protagonists. For his part, Kellen didn't call me, perhaps out of shame, or maybe he was too busy dealing with Zuriel's wrath. According to an audio file Mateo sent me, their argument was much more intense than I had imagined. "Kellen, explain what happened. Why is the land non-developable green space? You told me you researched it thoroughly." Zuriel's voice was sharp and full of reproach. "I didn't know either." My husband's voice was weak and full of excuses. "I was tricked too. The intermediary assured me." "Were you tricked or are you just stupid?" "You know what? Because I believed you. I tricked my husband and took his money to give it to you. Now it's all gone to waste. What am I supposed to tell that man?" "Tell him the investment went wrong. In business, sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. That's normal." "It's easy for you to say." "That's $40,000, all our marriage savings. Give me back my money. Give it back right now." "I don't know. That's your problem. My money is all tied up in there too." "I don't care. That's your problem. If you don't give me back my money, don't complain when I get nasty." Their argument ended with the sound of things breaking and Zuriel's sobs and insults. The relationship built on lies and money finally collapsed because of money. They began to attack each other like wounded animals. That night, Kellen came home looking miserable. He didn't say a word. He silently went into the bedroom and slammed the door shut. I didn't ask either. I left him to stew in his own pain and failure. It was the price of his stupidity, his greed, and his betrayal. Over the next few days, the atmosphere in our house was like a funeral. Kellen didn't leave the room. He refused to eat or talk. My mother-in-law kept calling, sometimes crying, sometimes insulting, blaming me for everything. I listened in silence and hung up. Meanwhile, Mateo also took action. He came home with a pained expression and told Zuriel that he knew everything, that a friend had told him everything she had said. He didn't hit or insult her. He just silently packed her clothes and their son's. "I can't continue living with a lying, cruel woman like you. Let's get a divorce," he told her in a calm but firm voice. Zuriel was stunned. Then she screamed, clung to him, and begged, but it was too late. Mateo left with his son without looking back. Zuriel was left alone in an empty house, having lost her husband, her son, and a large sum of money. She was completely broken. Her downfall was as swift and complete as Mateo and I had planned, but I knew the story wasn't over yet. A person like Kellen wouldn't stand idly by when cornered. And his mother, that malicious woman, wouldn't forgive me easily. I knew an even bigger storm was brewing. What dirty tricks would they use to try to turn the situation around? And would I have the strength to face them? Kellen's frustration didn't last long. Instead of blaming himself and repenting, his cowardly and accusatory nature resurfaced. He began looking for a target to vent his anger, and that target was none other than me. After several days of silence, he took action, not with a sincere conversation, but with petty, subtle, but malicious harassment. He started coming home late at night, smelling of alcohol. He didn't come into the bedroom. He sat in the living room and turned the TV up very loud or talked loudly on the phone with his friends, deliberately making noise so neither my son nor I could sleep. If I asked him to lower his voice, he would immediately snap at me, "This is my house. I'll do what I want. If you don't like it, leave." Meals at home also became torture. He criticized everything I cooked. Too salty, too bland, looks like leftovers. He would slam the bowl of soup on the table and leave without cleaning up. He wanted to make my life a living hell. He wanted to torture me psychologically with these dirty tricks so that I would leave the house on my own, allowing him to keep everything. At the same time, Zuriel wasn't sitting idly by either. Having lost everything, she went crazy. She stopped demanding money from Kellen and started attacking me. She began spreading false rumors about me in the neighborhood. She told people that I was a promiscuous woman, that I had not only allied with her husband, but also had many other suspicious relationships. She claimed I used charms to seduce men, that my garment workshop was doing well because I was a high-class call girl. These malicious, invented words spread like wildfire through the mouths of gossiping neighbors throughout the area. I started receiving furtive glances and hearing whispers behind my back every time I left the house. "Look, that's Kellen's wife. She seems nice, but they say she's trouble. She hooked up with a big shot to set up that huge workshop." The harassment reached its peak one morning while I was taking my son to school. Zuriel cut me off at the school gate. She no longer had that fragile, delicate appearance. With messy hair and bloodshot eyes, she looked like a woman who had lost her mind. "Stop right there, you bitch!" she screamed, drawing the attention of the other parents. "You ruined my life. You ruined my family. Today, I'm going to give you what you deserve." And she lunged at me, trying to grab my hair and scratch me. I was already anticipating this situation. I quickly put my son behind me and at the same time raised my phone, which was already in video recording mode. "What are you doing? Everyone look! This woman is assaulting me without cause at the school gate." My action made Zuriel stop. She saw the camera and the looks of disapproval around her. Her aggression lessened a bit, but she didn't give up. "You dare to record me, you husband stealer? You seduced my husband." "Don't talk nonsense," I replied in a calm, clear voice. "Your husband and mine met at the warehouse of their own free will. I am the victim. Or do you want me to show everyone the video of the infidelity I recorded that night?" My words were a fatal blow. Zuriel's face turned pale. She didn't expect me to be so direct. She stammered, You dare? Why wouldn't I dare? The ones who should be ashamed are you and my husband, not me. Now move aside so we can go to class." Saying this, I took my son's hand and walked past her with my head held high. She stayed there, motionless, amidst the murmurs of the crowd. The confrontation at the school gate temporarily calmed Zuriel's aggression, but I knew neither she nor my husband would stop. They were looking for any means to kick me out of the house and out of their lives, and they began to target what I loved most: my son. My mother-in-law, who had been quiet for a while, began to reappear. She didn't come to our house, but instead lurked near my son's school. She tried to lure the boy with candy and toys. "Ezekiel, come with Grandma. Grandma's going to give you a present," she called out sweetly. My son, though small, seemed to sense the falsehood. He hid fearfully behind me and didn't dare approach. Unable to lure her grandson, she insulted me. "See? You've taught your son to hate even his own grandmother. You're a bad mother. You'll pay for this." Her actions were becoming increasingly brazen. They turned our lives into constant tension and exhaustion. I knew that if we continued like this, the most affected would be my son. The boy began to show signs of anxiety. He would wake up scared at night and was afraid to go outside. I couldn't allow my son to live in such a toxic environment. Silence and no response were no longer the solution. The time had come to deliver the final blow, the ultimate attack that would end everything. I met again with Matteo, who was also being harassed by Zuriel. We decided not to give in anymore. We were going to bring everything out into the open. I drafted a detailed divorce petition, attaching all the evidence I had. Photos of the infidelity, recordings, videos, proof of the fraud conspiracy, and even proof of psychological abuse and harassment from my in-laws. Matteo did the same. But we didn't just limit ourselves to filing the petitions in court. I contacted some journalists I knew through my work. I anonymously provided them with part of the story, the juicier details. I only leaked information about an infidelity and fraud scandal involving a seemingly respectable family in Fairburn Heights. The media is very sensitive to these types of stories. They began to investigate. The media bomb was about to explode, and this time it would sweep away all their lies and ugliness. Would this total counterattack be powerful enough to end my nightmare? And what punishment would the traitors receive from the law and public opinion? The media bomb I silently prepared finally exploded, but its destructive power was greater than I had imagined. One morning, a major online newspaper published an article with a sensationalist headline: "All the truth about the infidelity scandal. Shaking Fairburn Heights. Wife catches husband with neighbor in a warehouse. $1 million fraud plot uncovered." Although the article anonymized the names of those involved, the characteristic details about the neighborhood, the old warehouse, and the dramatic caught-in-the-act moment made it easy for anyone living there to guess who the protagonists were. The news spread like wildfire. Within hours, it became the hottest topic in all online communities. Internet users, with an incredible ability to investigate, quickly found the identities of Kellen and Zuriel. Their photos were circulated everywhere, accompanied by comments full of all kinds of reproaches and insults. "Wow, the husband looks decent, but he's a real scumbag. The mistress is no better. Tried to scam her husband and her lover. Poor wife. Not only is she cheated on, but they almost stole her money." The media storm swept through like a tsunami, completely sinking Kellen's and Zuriel's lives. When Kellen went to work, he had to face the furtive glances and whispers of his colleagues. The scandal not only damaged his personal reputation, but also the company's image. His boss called him into the office and demanded he resolve his personal issues cleanly or face the highest disciplinary sanctions. Zuriel's situation was even more miserable. She couldn't leave the house. Neighbors who used to greet her now looked at her with contempt. The rumors about her magnified and became more malicious. She became completely isolated in the neighborhood where she lived. But the most affected was my mother-in-law. For her, reputation was everything, and she had always been proud of her family. Now her son was an adulterer, and her future daughter-in-law was despised by all of society. Even when she went to the market, she heard people whispering. She couldn't bear the humiliation, but instead of acknowledging her son's mistake, she turned all her anger on me. She thought I was behind all this, that I had deliberately shamed her family, and she decided to execute an even more cruel and outlandish revenge plan. She knew my weak points were my son and my precious garment workshop. One day, during lunchtime, while supervising a rush export order at the workshop, I received a call from my son's teacher. The teacher's voice on the other end of the phone was urgent. "Ezekiel's mother, come quickly to the school. Ezekiel's grandmother came. She's making a scene and trying to take the child. Come fast." I felt my heart stop. I dropped everything I was doing, ran to the car, and drove like a maniac toward the school. When I arrived, I was met with a chaotic scene. My mother-in-law was at the main gate arguing with the teachers. She was trying to force her way in, saying she wanted to see her grandson. "I'm his grandmother. I have the right to see my grandson. Get out of the way," she screamed. "Ma'am, the child is in class. You cannot enter. Please calm down and let's discuss this." The teachers tried to stop her. Just then, she saw me. She broke free from the teachers and lunged at me like a wild animal. "It was you, you snake. After ruining my son, now you want to take my grandson away. Today, I'm going to teach you some manners." She raised her hand to hit me, but this time I was ready. I took a step back and dodged her slap. At the same time, several parents nearby rushed over to restrain her. "What are you doing? Hitting someone in broad daylight?" "Let go of my daughter-in-law." A familiar voice was heard. My mother, who I didn't know when she had arrived, was there with a serious face. "If you have a problem, resolve it at home. This is a school, not a marketplace for you to come and cause a scene." My mother's appearance and the intervention of others made my mother-in-law calm down a little, but she didn't give up. She dropped to the ground and began to cry loudly, as usual. "Oh my God, the daughter-in-law allies with her mother to mistreat the mother-in-law. How miserable I am. I only wanted to see my grandson for a moment, and they won't even let me do that." Her dramatics might have stirred some compassion elsewhere, but here, where the article had spread, everyone knew her true colors, and no one believed her crocodile tears anymore. I didn't feel it was worth arguing with her. I went directly to the principal to demand they reinforce security and take measures to ensure she never approached my son again. When I left, the police had arrived. They warned my mother-in-law for disturbing the peace and wrote up a report. She was taken to the police station, ashamed and humiliated. But I knew that for someone like her, this wouldn't be the end. And, as expected, unable to attack me and my son directly, she targeted another goal, my garment workshop. A few days later, a joint inspection team from several departments suddenly showed up at my workshop. They said they had received an anonymous complaint that my workshop violated fire safety regulations, hired undocumented workers, and evaded taxes. I was sure it was a dirty trick by my mother-in-law. She was trying to use power and influence, however insignificant at the neighborhood level, to ruin my business. But she was wrong. My workshop, since its creation, had all its business records in order. All documents and procedures were legal. Since I had conducted business honestly, I had nothing to fear. I calmly cooperated with the inspection team, providing them with all the documents they requested. After half a day of investigation, they found no irregularities and had to leave quietly. My mother-in-law's drama failed again, but her malice made me rethink. She dared to use dirty tricks related to the law. Would she stop here, or was an even more terrible conspiracy waiting for me? The whole charade involving the supposed facial paralysis that my mother-in-law had prepared was quite elaborate. After the humiliation at the garment workshop, she didn't go straight home, but called Kellen and, between sobs, told him that I had made her so angry, her blood pressure had spiked, her energy had blocked, and now her mouth was starting to droop. Kellen, a blindly devoted son, rushed her to the hospital. He even called relatives to tell them that his mother was gravely ill because of his wife. He wanted to create a wave of family pressure to make me give in. That night, while I was at home, I received a call from Kellen's aunt. Her voice was full of reproach. "Amani, what did you do to make your mother-in-law like this? She's in the emergency room. They say she has facial paralysis. Kellen is alone and worried. You're the daughter-in-law too. Go see her." Hearing this, I almost burst out laughing. Their capacity for acting was truly astonishing, but I decided not to expose them immediately. I was going to play along and turn their drama into a comedy. "Really, Auntie? She's very sick?" I feigned panic. "I'm on my way right now." I hung up and immediately called my friend Charles, a famous neurologist at the city hospital. I quickly explained the situation and asked for his help. Charles, hearing it, burst out laughing. "Your mother-in-law is something else." "All right, leave it to me. You just need to bring the patient to the address I'm going to give you. I'll prepare a special acupuncturist." I arrived at the hospital. My mother-in-law was lying in bed, her mouth deliberately crooked and her eyes closed, emitting groans from time to time. Kellen was sitting by her side, his face full of worry. As soon as I arrived, he immediately stood up and said with a resentful voice, "See, are you happy? My mother is like this now. You're celebrating, aren't you?" I didn't answer him. I approached the bed and said in a voice full of guilt, "Mama, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Don't scare me. Or do you want me to take you somewhere else for a checkup? I know a very good acupuncturist, a specialist in facial paralysis and strokes. I'm sure if he sees you, you'll be cured." My mother-in-law, hearing this, slightly opened her eyes. She seemed curious. Kellen hesitated. "What acupuncturist? Is he trustworthy? We're already at the hospital. Let the doctors handle it." "Don't you know?" I said. "This man is amazing. People call him the miracle doctor. Just by taking your pulse, he knows what illness you have. He doesn't need machines or anything. He has cured many people with facial paralysis and hemiplegia. Let's give it a try. We have nothing to lose." Curiosity, and perhaps confidence in her own acting, made my mother-in-law agree. She probably thought a small-town acupuncturist wouldn't discover her farce. Kellen was also convinced. So, between the two of us, we helped my mother-in-law, who kept pretending she had trouble walking, go to the consultation at the address Charles had given me. The consultation was small and modest, with a slight smell of medicinal herbs. An acupuncturist dressed in brown with a white beard and hair was reading a book. It was my friend, Dr. Charles, perfectly disguised. Charles told my mother-in-law to sit down and extend her hand so he could take her pulse. He closed his eyes, rested his fingers on her wrist, and put on a serious expression. Kellen and I stood by his side, waiting in silence. After a long while, Charles opened his eyes, stroked his beard, and shook his head. "Strange, very strange," he said. "Is there a problem, doctor?" Kellen asked, worried. "The pulse of this lady is not that of a patient with facial paralysis," Charles said in a mysterious voice. "It is more like the pulse of someone who is angry. The energy is rising, the liver is congested, but there is no trace of meridian blockage." My mother-in-law, hearing this, changed color, but continued groaning and holding on. "Doctor, I feel very sick. My mouth keeps trembling." "Ah, that's easy," Charles smiled. "I'll put some needles in a couple of places, and it will go away immediately, but my method is a bit special." Saying this, he took out a set of needles from a wooden box, but those needles were strangely large and long, like metal skewers. "Needles?" my mother-in-law stammered. Her eyes widened at the sight of the shiny needles. Fear was evident on her face. "Yes," Charles said calmly. "I will put needles in the main points of the face, around the mouth, and on the crown of the head. It will hurt a little, but I guarantee that the energy will flow again, and your mouth will straighten out." He took the longest needle and brought it closer to her face. "Come on, lie down. Let's start now." At that moment, my mother-in-law couldn't keep acting. Fear overcame everything else. She jumped up from the chair and waved her hands. No, I don't need needles. I'm fine now." Her voice was completely normal. Her mouth was no longer crooked. She stood up and walked around to prove that she was perfectly healthy. "Look, I'm cured. I don't need treatment. Thank you, doctor." Kellen, standing beside her, was left speechless, not understanding what was happening. "Hey, Mama, are you okay now?" "Yes, I'm fine. It must have been the bumpy car ride. I'm fine now. Let's go home," she said. And pulling her son, she ran out the door. Charles stayed behind, stroking his beard and smiling. "Wow, the lady heals quickly. A true medical miracle. The consultation is $50. I'll charge the son." Kellen, dazed, took out his wallet, paid, and ran after his mother. The farce couldn't have ended more comically. My mother-in-law had exposed her own lie in front of her son. I, standing in the consultation room, couldn't hold back my laughter. This play would probably be an unforgettable memory for her. After this resounding failure, would they have the courage to try another trick? Or would this be the beginning of more outlandish and dangerous actions? After the tragicomedy of the acupuncture, my mother-in-law couldn't say anything more. She went into her room silently and slammed the door shut. Shame and anger were evident on her face, but she couldn't do anything. Kellen was completely confused. He looked at me, then at his mother's closed door, not understanding what had just happened. He probably still didn't believe that his mother had staged such an elaborate drama. I didn't feel the need to explain it. I let the truth reveal itself. I believed that after this, Kellen would at least start to see his perfect mother with different eyes. But the silence didn't last long. Humiliated by the failure of her farce, my mother-in-law started to hate me even more. She stopped picking fights directly and began to use crueler methods. She started a Cold War. She treated me as if I were invisible in the house. She didn't answer me when I spoke to her. She didn't eat what I prepared. She would make instant noodles or order takeout and eat alone in her room. She wanted to isolate me, to turn me into a stranger in my own home. Kellen, caught in the middle, was in a very awkward position. He would go into his mother's room to comfort her, and then come to me and say, "Mama is angry. Have a little patience." "What have I done to have to put up with this?" I replied. He was speechless again. The atmosphere at home was suffocating. I knew this was my mother-in-law's tactic. She wanted to use this tension to wear me down, so that I couldn't bear it anymore and would leave on my own. And she almost succeeded. I was truly exhausted. But I couldn't leave. Leaving now would be like admitting the fault was mine. I had to stay and fight until the end. The last straw was one weekend afternoon. That day, I had a large export order at my workshop that needed to be finished urgently. I worked at the workshop until almost 10 o'clock at night. When I got home, the house was dark and cold. My mother-in-law and Kellen had gone to bed early. Without leaving a single piece of food for me, I quietly went to the kitchen, thinking of preparing some noodles. Just as I turned on the stove, Kellen came out of the bedroom. He didn't ask if I had eaten or if I was tired. His first words were an accusation. "Did you know that Mama wasn't feeling well today? You were out all day and didn't even call. You're such a good daughter-in-law." "What do you mean Mama wasn't well? She was perfectly fine when I left this morning." "What do you mean fine? She had a headache and dizziness all afternoon. I had to miss work to take care of her at home, and you were stuck in your workshop neglecting your family." He was getting more and more excited. "Are you done?" I couldn't take it anymore. "Your mother was sick? Did you take her to the doctor? Or was it another one of her dramas? You say I've neglected my family. And you? What have you done for this family? Aside from working, coming home, staring at your phone, and ignoring your wife and son, do you have the right to accuse me?" My words were like adding fuel to the fire. Kellen turned pale with rage. He had never been talked to so directly. "You dare to talk to me like that?" he growled. "Do you think that just because you earn a little money you can lecture me?" "Yes, I do," I shouted. "I earned that money through my own effort. I didn't ask anyone for it. And that money gives me the right to be respected, not to put up with your and your mother's irrational and selfish attitude." "You rude woman!" He lost control. He lunged at me, grabbed me by the collar of my shirt, and roughly shoved me against the wall. Thump! My head hit the cold brick wall hard. My vision blurred. My ears were ringing. I only heard his growl. "I've been too good to you. Today, I'm going to teach you some manners." The pain that started in the back of my neck spread throughout my body, but it wasn't as painful as the ache in my heart. He had hit me. The man I had loved, the father of my son, had laid a hand on me. All affection, down to the last shred of hope, shattered and turned to dust. When I opened my eyes, I saw him raising his hand for a second blow, but he stopped. His gaze was fixed on a spot above the door, his face filled with dread and fear. I followed his gaze. In the corner of the wall, a small red LED light was blinking rhythmically. It was the mini security camera I had secretly installed a few days earlier. Just after deciding I wouldn't give in anymore, I had foreseen that a cornered person like Kellen would lose control of his actions, and I was right. From the moment he shoved me and threw me to the ground to his last threatening words, his entire violent action was clearly recorded. He realized it. The hand he had raised slowly lowered, and his fierce expression transformed into extreme fear. You, he stammered, backing away a few steps. I leaned against the wall and slowly stood up. The pain was still there, but a feeling of victory filled my heart. Yes, I said, pointing at the camera with a voice as cold as ice. Everything is recorded. Thank you for providing me with the final and most powerful evidence. I didn't say anything else. I staggered to my room and locked the door. I collapsed onto the floor and hugged my head. The tears began to flow, but this time they weren't tears of weakness. They were tears of liberation. This battle was finally over, and I knew I would be the victor. The next morning, I woke up with a sharp pain in the back of my neck and an iron determination. I had barely slept last night. After confirming that the video was safe in the cloud, I spent the night planning my final counterattack. No more drama, no more arguments. This time, I would use the law and the truth to end everything. I didn't go to the workshop. Instead, I called the lawyer Matteo had recommended to me, an old friend of his. I told him the entire case, from the land fraud to the assault last night. I sent him all the evidence I had, recordings, messages, photos, and, most importantly, the security camera video. The lawyer, after reviewing everything, said with a confident voice, "Imani, with this evidence, we will not only win the divorce, but we can also sue him for assault and his mother for defamation and disturbing the peace. Do you want to go all the way?" "I want to go all the way," I replied without hesitation. "I want them to pay for everything they've done." "All right, let's begin." That very day, the divorce petition and the criminal complaint were filed in court and at the police station. Everything was done quickly and professionally. I didn't need to intervene. The lawyer handled everything. Meanwhile, at home, Kellen and his mother were terrified. They knew I had the evidence, but they didn't know what I was going to do. My silence was more terrifying than any insult. Kellen called me and sent me countless messages, sometimes begging for forgiveness, sometimes threatening. "Imani, please, I was wrong. I was drunk. It wasn't me. Forgive me this time. If you make a scene, I'll lose everything. If you dare report me to the police, I won't leave you alone. Don't forget, you're still my wife." I didn't reply to any message. I simply saved them in silence as proof of his harassment. And the day came when they had to face justice. One afternoon, while I was at home with my son, I received a message from Matteo. "The police went to your mother-in-law's house." More than rejoicing, I felt relief. Karma had finally arrived. According to what I was told, when the police arrived, my mother-in-law screamed and made a scene, claiming that I was framing them and harming them. But faced with the summons and the initial evidence the police presented, she couldn't refute anything. Kellen completely broke down. When they took him away, he showed no resistance. He simply followed in silence, like a man without a soul. The incident became the biggest scandal in the neighborhood. The story of the good daughter-in-law who suffered violence and fraud from her in-laws spread like wildfire. This time, no one believed my mother-in-law's tears. All the previous sympathy turned into contempt and anger. They themselves had destroyed what they valued most, their reputation and honor. But I knew this wasn't the end yet. The real battle would be fought in court, and I was fully prepared for it. I didn't just want a divorce. I wanted to regain custody of my son, all the assets that belonged to me, and most importantly, for them to stand trial and pay for their crimes. I believed that justice should prevail, not just for me, but for all women who suffer injustice in silence. Our divorce trial was set for a month later. During the wait, I moved out of the jointly owned house and rented a small apartment for my son and me. I wanted to completely break away from that place that brought back so many painful memories. My life began to return to normal. The workshop continued to do well, and my son, no longer living in such a tense environment, became a cheerful child again. But I knew my in-laws wouldn't sit idly by, and as expected, they hired a well-known lawyer and prepared to fight until the end. They refused the divorce, the division of assets, and even sought custody of my son. Their argument was that I had set a trap for the family and slandered them, so I lacked the moral character to be a mother. Their audacity reached new heights. On the day of the trial, I faced them. Kellen was haggard. He looked 10 years older. My mother-in-law still had her sharp and malicious expression. Their lawyer began by trying to discredit me. He claimed that I was an unfaithful wife who had an inappropriate relationship with Mateo. They presented our meeting at the coffee shop as evidence, but my lawyer quickly refuted it. He presented messages and recordings that proved that the meeting was simply to exchange evidence of the infidelity of their respective spouses, a collaboration between two victims. Then came our turn to counterattack. My lawyer began to present the evidence. The video of Kellen assaulting me was projected onto a large screen. The entire room held its breath. Kellen's fierce expression and his threatening words said it all. My mother-in-law tried to excuse him. That was because Imani provoked him. She acted insolently, and my son got angry. But that weak excuse couldn't hide the evident violence. Next, the evidence of the infidelity, the land fraud, and the embezzlement of funds was presented. With every piece of evidence that came to light, Kellen's and his mother's faces grew paler. They hadn't imagined that I would have collected everything so thoroughly and perfectly. When my lawyer finally presented the criminal complaint, asking for them to be charged with assault, defamation, and fraud, they completely broke down. My mother-in-law fainted in the courtroom, and Kellen slumped in his chair, covering his face with his hands. Their performance was over, and this time, no one could save them. What would the final sentence be for them, and would I find true peace after all this? The trial ended with my absolute victory. The judge, after examining all the evidence, issued an impeccably just sentence. The court granted our divorce. As for custody, considering that the in-laws' family environment presented numerous factors detrimental to the child's psychological development, and especially the father's violent behavior, the court ruled that I would exercise exclusive custody of my son, Ezekiel. Kellen was obligated to pay a monthly child support allowance until the child turned 18. As for the assets, although the jointly owned house was acquired during the marriage, given that most of the purchase and monthly payments came from my income, and considering Kellen's embezzlement of joint assets for an illegal investment, the court ruled that I would be awarded 70% of the house's value. He would only receive 30%. Furthermore, he was responsible for repaying the entire $60,000 USD he had arbitrarily withdrawn from the joint savings fund. In the criminal sphere, the court referred the entire file to the district attorney. For the crimes of battery with a dangerous object and fraud, Kellen would face an inevitable criminal trial. My mother-in-law was sentenced to a heavy fine for defamation and disturbing the peace. Sentence was passed, and justice was done. I left the courthouse with a light heart. Finally, the nightmare of so many years was over. I had recovered everything that belonged to me, my son, my assets, and most importantly, my honor and my freedom. Shortly after the trial, Kellen was arrested for investigation. My mother-in-law, after paying the fine and facing the contempt and ostracism of relatives and neighbors, completely broke down. She tried to sell the house in her hometown to help her son, but she couldn't change the outcome. Finally, Kellen was sentenced to 5 years in state prison, a heavy price for his stupidity and his betrayal. Our jointly owned house was also sold. After giving Kellen his 30%, according to the court ruling, with the remaining money and my savings, I bought a luxury apartment in a new, quiet, and safe neighborhood in Atlanta. I wanted a completely new beginning for my son and me. My garment workshop, which had been affected by the scandal for a while, returned to normal and prospered day by day. My reputation was not only unaffected, but enhanced. Many clients came to me not only for the quality of my products, but also out of admiration for my strength and tenacity. As for Zuriel, after her true colors were revealed, she couldn't live in peace in that neighborhood either. She had to sell her house and move elsewhere to escape people's ridicule. Mateo also completed the divorce process. He became a single father raising his son alone. From time to time, we still saw each other, not as lovers, but as friends and allies who had overcome a great storm together. We shared experiences about raising children and helped each other with work. There was a special understanding and respect between us. Sometimes I wondered if we could become something more in the future, but I wasn't in a hurry. My heart had suffered too many wounds. It needed time to heal. For now, I only wanted to enjoy a peaceful life with my son. One afternoon, while playing with my son in the park, I received a letter. The sender was Kellen, writing from prison. I hesitated for a moment, but I opened it and read it. The letter was long, the handwriting crooked. He wrote about his repentance and the painful nights in prison. He asked for forgiveness and a chance to start over. He said that when he was released, he would dedicate himself to making it up to my son and me for everything. I read the letter to the end without feeling anything. Forgive? Maybe someday I will, but it will be for my own inner peace, not to give him a chance. Love and trust, once broken, cannot be glued back together. I tore the letter into pieces and threw it in the trash. The past was behind me. I didn't want it to interfere with my present life anymore. I turned to see my son, who was happily playing on the slide. A simple happiness filled my heart. This was the life I wanted, not a life of wealth and luxury, but a peaceful life with the people I love, and I knew I deserved it. 5 years passed in the blink of an eye. My son's life and mine had changed a lot. The small apartment from before was now a warm, cozy home that we had decorated to our liking, full of laughter. My son Ezekiel was already a handsome third grader. He was a very good student and had a special talent for drawing. Seeing his colorful drawings, I knew that his soul had completely healed from the wounds of the past. My garment workshop had become a small fashion company with its own brand, the Legacy Thread. I no longer had to carry everything alone. I had a team of passionate and talented employees by my side. My life was busy now, but full of meaning. I found joy in work, in creating beautiful products, and in employing many other people. My relationship with Matteo had also entered a new phase. After a long time as friends, we realized that there was not only compassion, but also love between us, a love built on understanding, sharing, and respect. He proposed marriage, and I accepted. Our wedding was not loud or ostentatious. It was a small, warm celebration with our closest family and friends. Ezekiel and Matteo's son became brothers who loved and cared for each other. Together we formed a new family, a family that, although not perfect, was always filled with love and respect. Sometimes I heard news of people from the past. Kellen was released from prison. He didn't stay in the city. He went to live with his mother in a small town in rural Georgia. My ex-mother-in-law, they say, had weakened, and her mind had clouded from the successive blows. She no longer insulted. She just sat silently in a corner of the house. Perhaps that was her greatest punishment. I heard that Zuriel had married another man in a distant state and was living a normal life. The whirlwind of hatred and betrayal had finally ended. Everyone had paid for their mistakes and found their own path. One weekend afternoon, our whole family went on a picnic in the park. Under the warm golden sun, watching the two boys run on the grass and my husband tenderly peeling an apple for me, I felt total peace. The past had taught me a very expensive lesson about the value of love, marriage, and self-esteem. I had fallen. I had despaired, but it was those very difficulties that turned me into the woman I am today. A strong, independent woman who knows how to love herself. I smiled, a genuinely happy smile. I knew there would be many more challenges in the future, but I was no longer afraid, because now I had a true home to return to, a haven of peace. And I know that as long as there is love and trust, we can overcome anything together. My life, after the storm, had finally seen the rainbow. Did you like the story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks, so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.